Sanibonani Bafundi. So today I'm making a tie for this gentleman for his matric dance. So the most important thing is to just be excited that he's finishing high school. And the second most important thing is obviously to be fabulous. So I'm going to start by just getting a 45-degree angle. I'm going to get it off of the selvage. Because of course here, we may not have cut 100% straight. So I need to work on the selvage, get my 45-degree angle. And now the width of this tie, it's 7.5 each side. So what is that? 375 each side. Just gonna estimate, it's around, I'll put it about here. And now I want to make sure I get a perpendicular line here. Let me just move it a little bit up just for in case. Get my perpendicular line there. Sorry, I just say 7 centimeters. So it's 375 both sides. I mean 7.5 centimeters. It's 375 both sides. And now, it kind of depends on the style of the tie. I like to go just because, this is my ruler, so it's easy for me to work with this. Going 60 centimeters there. And that's going to be the skinny portion of the tie, which is around 3 centimeters broad for me. This is just my style. You make it as broad or as skinny as you want. So obviously that's 1.5 centimeters on either side of the line. And I'm just going to join those two. So this, at the end of the day, is more or less the shape of my tie. So each tie, you have to just gauge the thickness of the material and then decide how we are going to achieve that thickness. This satin, I feel, is really thick enough that we don't have to put so many layers. So I'm actually going to cut a layer of lining to give me the structure on the inside here, and then I'll just turn both these sides up. If it's a skinnier one, then I'll rather, cut broader here and fold it a few times so that by the time it folds here, it's thick enough. But for our purposes now, I'm just going to do a bit of a simpler version. So here again, I'm using the 45-degree angles so that the tip of my tie is a 90-degree angle. I don't know if it really has to be. That's just kind of my vibe. It's how I do my things. So this is now the kind of the final shape of my tie. And then here, of course, it is now 3 centimeters wide. Here, this portion is going to be tied. So that this is going straight there. I suppose I could just draw it like that, like a sane person. 1.5 either side of that line. Okay. So down here on the tip of the tie, this is easy peasy. I'm just going to add 1 centimeter seam allowance. Now, here we have to do a little bit of figuring out according to how much we are going to fold over for this tie. So at the end of the day, this one, I'm just going to do one fold each side. Just going to fold over like that. Boom, finished. So I need this distance plus a 1 centimeter turn under, because of course I can't just have those raw edges just chilling over there. So this is 375 plus 1. So I'm just going to go. Actually, you should be measuring this straight or perpendicular with this edge line. So yeah, 375, more like, here it is, 375, coming out 375 plus 1 is always going to be 475. And the same here, I just want to get it more or less perpendicular with this line, 475. And the same here, this is now 1.5, so I need 1.5 plus 1 is going to be 2.5. 1.5 plus 1, 2.5. And that 2.5 can just go straight down the small end of the time. And this we're just going to join. Did I measure that incorrectly? Here we go. So this one I fold just to the center. And like I say, it really all depends on the thickness of your fabric. If you're going to put more or less, I like to have at least something here down the center just to hold the form. But I suppose it's not really a crime if you don't have that. I'm just going to check my measurement here. I only bought half a meter of this, and it's about 75 centimeters. And I like my tie to be 1.5 centimeters, 1.5 meters long. So I'm going to go from here, from this center line. I'm just going to trace that a little bit next door and move. I'm going to need a little bit more. I suppose because this is a straight piece, it's actually fine. No, it's not a straight piece. So let me move another 5 centimeters. So here's now the central line of the small piece. And you can, if you want to make this a straight piece, I'm not going to, just because I'm extra like that. But it's not going to be that much broader. It's only going to be 4 centimeters. So 2 centimeters each side. 2, 4. And 90-degree tip. And then, again, around 60 centimeters. It's going to be 3 centimeters broad in total, 1.5 each side. And that 1.5 is going to just remain straight so that it can join with this larger portion. There it is. And I can see from just from this angle, these two are going to match fine. Sometimes if I've drawn it the other way around, I have to just recheck that. But what I can do to make my life a little bit easier is to just make that angle exactly 45 degrees. Because again, when it's cut here, it's not exactly straight. So I'm just making sure this is exactly 45 degrees. Yeah. Same this side. Exactly 45 degrees. Okay. Same story here for the top of the ties. Seam allowance is just 1 centimeter. And then same story here, whatever that distance is, which is 2 plus 1, 3. And same story here, making it, taking measure perpendicular from this edge of the line. Same here, 1.5 plus 1 is 2.5, 2.5. And let's actually do it here, because this is where I moved it to 2.5. I mean, this is the portion that's still straight. 2.5. So this 2.5 should be straight. And this straight half should be straight. You can join. There we go. And this one. There we go. Okay, so here we have the tie pieces sorted out. These are the two main pieces. Another piece that we're going to need, and I'm just going to do it here. Here, give me 2.5 centimeters there. So give me 2 centimeters there. I just need one small piece. No, I mustn't do it on bias actually. Let me do it here. I'm going to take this straight line with the 45 degrees. Going to make it 3.5, no, 4 centimeters. So this is for that little band that goes at the back of the tie. Always make it hopelessly too big and then trim it down. So it should be 4 centimeters wide and then, or 4 centimeters broad. Wide, whatever's going to fit you. So this whole tie is only 7 centimeters, 7.5. So here it's going to be maybe 5 centimeters. Centimeter turn-offs each side is 6 centimeters. So actually I only need that. Why not cut that whole thing? Why not? Why not be greedy? Okay, and then here, one thing that happens to me every single time is that it ends up just being too skinny. So I'm always going to cut an extra 0.5 centimeter here. I just measured that with my eyes. And nothing really to it, just cut it out. Obviously, as I cut this transition here from the straight portion to the portion that's going broader to the end, I just kind of smooth that out with my scissors. So here I don't need the extra 0.5 centimeter, but I am going to cut just on the outside of the line, an extra like that. Right. I'll forget to add that 0.5 centimeter to the side because I'm just thinking about the next step and not paying attention. Okay. Oh, and of course, I cannot forget this important little lassie piece. So those two pieces done. I'm going to go and get some more fabrics and then we're going to carry on. Just had to find the right fabrics. Now I'm back. So this portion of the lining, this is my grandfather's top, very fashionable generally. This is this portion here. So because it's such a small piece, I really don't stress myself too much about the grain of the fabric here. I'm just going to trace this off in a bit of a ghetto manner. And here up at the sides, I do around 5 centimeters. There's no real reason, this just works for me. And as you know, I'm always going to cut a little extra. So we'll give another iron because it's still quite crinkly. Okay, so I cut that piece, cut this piece. So bias, or I can say cutting on the correct angle of the grain is really important. Otherwise, over time, things start warping around. But something that's this size, it's not really possible to warp. It's going to be so stuck in place. So here, I'd rather just cut it wherever the fabric will allow me to. Okay. There we go, there we go. Okay, I'm going to find that. Then, like I said, depending on the fabric, I'll decide what kind of middle I'm going to put, if I am going to put at all. I do like to put something, just because I'm extra like that. It's getting so chaos. So I'm just using this piece of lining. I'll usually do a piece of lining if I don't really, if the fabric's thick enough, then I'll just use some piece of lining that I have lying around. Again, we're going with the grain. Now this one, the last portion of the selvage is there, but I can see this is straight just by how it's framed. So I'll just draw the exact same thing. But this time without the seam allowance. So start with 375 both sides, 2.5, about 60, and 1.5 each side. And in this case, because it is reasonably thick fabric, I'm just going to do this on the front portion, just to give that a little bit of stability. And then, here I'm just going to kind of thumb suck 15 centimeters, 1.5 by side. And I'm just going to cut this out exactly like this. So if my fabric was extremely thin, and I didn't want to go through all the drama of doing the multiple folds, I would find a thicker fabric and cut this shape out and use this as the stiffening on the inside. So from there, what I'm going to do is find a needle and some basting thread, and I'm going to baste along the lines of the final shape of the tie. Because I need to transfer this mark to the right side. I don't want to do it with chalk because I'm going to have to erase it with water, and on satin it's going to be a drama. And basically, can't really find another way to move this mark to the other side. And I need it on the other side, so I'm just going to baste all of that. From there, what I'll do is on the tips, the top, the front and back tip, I'm going to iron up that seam allowance 1 centimeter, and I'm going to do the same on the line. Right, so now I just ironed this section. It's good to iron it now because it's going to become harder and harder to iron as time goes. You see there, I've just ironed that up, iron it like so, iron the little tip up, iron again. Now I have tried so many times to do this by machine, but every time I just end up questioning my life. So I've kind of just given up. I don't know, maybe I should try again now that I have some more experience and see if it still brings me to tears or not. But right now I'm just kind of showing you, whatever is happening in the studio. And at the moment it's this tie. And like so many things, I really don't have the time to go and rethink this thing. And I suppose it does actually end up costing a lot of time doing it by hand. But it's also a way of just having my signature. So anyway, here, this one I've pinned already in place. And I'm just going to make sure it's nice and flat here. Because I actually am going to start from the edge just to secure that lining. I'm not going to be too precious about those stitches as long as they're not too tight or too loose. This portion here at the edge gets kind of tucked away, so I don't mind my thread coming through to the front side. But from here, of course, we need to be very cautious about our stitching. So I'm doing essentially a back stitch, stitching the lining to the tie and not letting it show onto the front side of the lining, of the tie. I'm sure there's a much easier way. What I find with the machine stitch is that I can just not get it to look neat. Always ends up being kind of skew, leaning to one side. It's not a great look for a tie. So, no, this is just the style that I developed, and it works for me. Also because it's very easy to do each one unique, with the measurements here. I don't have to have a set formula because it's always going to depend on the fabric, the width that the client wants, and all those kind of things. So what I did forget is actually to first just base this down, but I'm just going to carry on because I live on the edge. Obviously, it would be easier to do that without the lining. So if you're watching this, you can just stop judging me. Go and pin that down first, base that down first, then come back and finish off the lining. So I'm not going to make you stick around for this whole situation. I'm just going to get to the point because there I'm going to actually sew the point together. Just trying to tuck that little piece of thread in. No, nothing too exciting, just a back stitch, making sure it's just between the lining and this turn up, not going to the front of the tie at all. Right, so here I am right at the tip there. Just getting everything nice and fashion. Getting rid of these little threads. So this is very finicky. The thinner the fabric, the more tears you can expect to shed. But really what I'm doing is just whip stitching this tip right on the edge of the fold, so don't end up creating a weird mountain there. Trying not to have so many knots that I end up just stabbing someone from a rage. So yeah, that's basically that. I'm just going to grab each end of that. See there, each end of the tip there, coming. I don't go all the way down. I'll go like 3 mils from the bottom, just because I don't want any of the stitching to be visible. Turn around and come back. Just in between all of the previous stitches. So it's really locked nice and secure. Just back to the tip of the lining, and then I'll just carry on up the other side. Just one thing to note is that, especially with a satin, you can very easily iron through the seams. So if you iron it on this side, you can easily see a line there where the seams are. So I take a piece of paper and just scooch it in underneath there so that when I iron, the seams aren't pressing directly on the front part of the fabric. And when we iron the rest of it, we just need to be conscious about that we don't want to over iron and then get a weird line on the right side of the fabric. Which I think is also one of the challenges I have with stitching this by machine. So of course we have to then iron and turn around, iron again, all that kind of thing. And I really struggle to do all of that and keep it neat, prevent it from becoming just like a train station with rails going everywhere, every which direction. So yeah, these days I've got a really amazing chef that I work with who's taking a lot of work off of my plate. So I am having a little bit more time and energy to do fun things like this, like the YouTube channel. And so as we work more together, I will have more time and emotional energy to put into really rethinking a lot of my methods. Because a lot of my methods, when I started the business, I was selling suits whilst simultaneously figuring out how to make a suit. So a lot of it was like panic stations, just figure it out as fast as possible and get it done because you just need to make money, you need to eat. So a lot of my methods have been kind of influenced by that whole idea of we don't have time to figure this out, just do the simplest thing, even though very often the simplest way can be the longest. Okay, so here we are, done that. I'm going to iron this first before I put the shape in. But it's very basic. This shape is the shape of the tie. I'm going to scooch it in there. and I'll just baste this, within that shape. Here, I'll first join that portion. Um, before I baste that portion, because there's going to be a seam allowance there and the next portion. So I'm going to obviously stitch that, iron that, and then I'll just baste this in place. And you see it's just within the lines of the shape that I drew there. It's now been basted out and marked like that. I suppose I could baste this in now. I mean, who's going to die in the iron first? Okay, so I also just stitch that together, making sure to mismatch the edges a little bit so that when I stitch, it's one straight piece. And you see there, doesn't match exactly, and this is because I cut with my eye the extra half a centimeter. Then here I just folded a piece of paper. This is a 90-degree angle, so you can just fold it a few times. Stuck it under there and gave that a nice iron. You can see here, I hope you can see that on the camera, but you can see the edges of the seam allowance shining through there. So of course, if you had done it here, it would be a lot more obvious because there's a lot more seam allowance there with the hand stitching, and this is a more important portion. So here I need to now put in this little situation, which would have been way easier if I'd done it before, but I got sidetracked by fashion. Sue me. Okay, making sure it's in the middle. So this I'm just going to do a very quick and easy baste. I like just having something there. It really, for me, just gives me a little bit more security with the shape of this piece, unless it's a very thick fabric, or unless I'm doing a few more folds, maybe a 4-fold tie, or I've never actually done a 7-fold tie. That's a little bit extreme for me. But with that kind of thing, you don't really need this central shape. But I like to just, like I said, I like to have just something here, keeping a little bit of shape. And also, this is going to help me when I start doing my folds, because I like to baste one side down to this, just to give me a bit of security. So, basting. Now, the one thing maybe I really need to say here is that the warp threads of the fabric and the weft threads do not have the same amount of stretch to them. So even though we've cut this exactly on 45 degrees, it's not going to stretch exactly straight down with that bias angle. It's going to stretch a little bit to the side. So I always do a tie over 2 days. I stitch it to a certain point, and then I just let it chill and hang, because that stretches it out before I close it up. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is hit the iron and iron up, and obviously I've got my, basting stitches there, so I can see where I need to fold this up to. Very importantly is not to iron over here, just on the edge. Now the more like fancy ties don't really iron here. They leave a bit of a roll here. It really depends what you want to do, what your style is, etc. Me, I like to have this reasonably flat, to be honest. So I'm going to iron it up, send aside, iron it up, but I'm not going to iron here. I'm just going to make sure my iron is right on the edge there. If you want to be very extra, you can put a paper or something there just to be sure. Probably I'm going to do that because I don't feel like crying too much with this time. And here I'm just going to save myself the emotional drama. Just trim that little seam allowance down. Okay, so let me hit the iron. We have it. Done all of the ironing up. Made sure that there's no evidence of all of that coming up there. Just going to trim off this excess lining just so that I can reduce bulk. Okay, so yeah, now I've got this like this. In this case, I was actually, remember, I was not paying attention and I accidentally did not cut this extra half a centimeter on this side. So I'm going to use this as the one with the lip because it's a little bit broader. It's going to be a little bit easier for me there. And this one where I forgot, I'm going to use as the underside. Now, one of the reasons I like having this lining there is because I'm going to herringbone stitch this in place onto that piece of lining. I don't know why I do this, but because I love hand stitching too much at the end of the day. What kind of insane person doesn't love hand stitching? What kind of insanity is that? So I'm just going to herringbone stitch it. Now, if I was doing more folds on this, let me just thread this thing. Then okay, so if I was doing more folds, then this fold would have folded here and there'd still be more to come in and fold. So stitching this, you could actually stitch it like, let's say, for example, down here, and then this would be another fold and another fold. So I think that technique of doing the herringbone stitch has just kind of followed me from there. And I do feel we need to stabilize this piece of lining that I put in the middle as the shape. I feel I can't just leave it like hanging around there. So I do want to, I'm talking so much, I forget which side. Okay, so it's this side. I do just want to stabilize it a little bit and make sure it doesn't flap about too much. So now this herringbone is catching the lining on that side. And this side I'm actually going through as many layers as possible, hopefully catching the lining, which I'm pretty sure I have, but of course not coming through to the front of the tie, which is of course why my left hand is underneath here, so that I can feel when I get through to the right side of the tie. So how I do, I'm going to go all the way through to the right side of the tie and keep this kind of at an angle, keep the needle at an angle, and then sort of slowly pull back, and it will at a point like snap out. And then I'll know I've lost the bottom layer or the front layer, so I can continue with that stitch. So see, I go all the way through, and then slowly pull back at a bit of an angle. There you go. So there I know I don't have the right side again or anymore. And I'm trying to keep this reasonably in the middle, the stitch that I'm doing through the lining, because I feel like having a stitch reasonably in the middle is the most stable that I can give this lining that's otherwise going to be flapping around on the inside there. So I'm just going to continue with that. So theoretically, with the maths being perfectly mathed, this fold over is going to come 1 centimeter over the center, and then this fold over I can iron 1 centimeter like that, and fold it over, and that fold line where that centimeter has disappeared will be exactly in the middle. But I don't think that has ever happened to me even once. I don't know if anyone has a reason other than that fabric, it's a little bit like water. It likes to move around. You can't really control it, especially soft fabrics that we're going to use for a time. So I'm just kind of nodding off 3 times in one place, nothing too exciting. So yeah, this portion, I always actually just by hand first go along and just by eye measure where's my center so that I can pin it there. And I'm trying not to pin all the way through, so I don't want to accidentally damage, especially satin like this. If you catch it a little bit funny, hours of tears, buckets of tears. So yeah, that's basically that. Just going along, measuring with my eye where's the center and folding accordingly. Not doing it every single centimeter. Guess it's about every 15 centimeters I'm doing it. Really just to give me a guide when I open this up in a minute. One thing I must maybe say here is that initially when I ironed this, I was following the lines here, but then when I looked at it this way, it was a little bit skewed, like so. So just went ahead and ironed that a little bit out so that the shape is perfect. And I feel nothing for cheating a little bit like that. Because at the end of the day, like I say, the fabric, it's a bit like water. It's always moving around. So at the end of the day, what I really want, this side must look perfect. It mustn't look skewed. If that's on the exact lines or not, for me, it's neither here nor there. Especially, I mean, the lines are thick. You see how I cut like a cowboy. So it really doesn't faze me if I have to, especially here, you have to really get this shape looking nice and neat. Okay, so I feel that is reasonably reasonable. So now I can go ahead and unpin all of this, keeping the pin just in this layer that's going to be folded over. I'll just undo a section here for you. I'll just do the front section, or this back section, this piece that's skinnier. Now let's just do the whole thing. Why not? Live an opulent life. Don't hold back. More is more. So then I can look at it from this side and go and give this an iron. And then just gauge. So you see this is around a centimeter, but that's obviously less than a centimeter, maybe 3/4. And iron all this up very, very sharp. This piece I do quite sharp. But following this guide that I've made of where is the actual center, I found if I just go ahead, this was actually done pretty recently. But I find if I just go ahead and make this 1/2 or 1 centimeter and then fold it up, it ends up on the other journey. So I rather like to do like this, just so it gives me, I don't know, stability, guidance. It works better when I do it like this. Let me pop to the iron. Okay, so this is really part one for me. You see I've stitched this or ironed this down, and of course ironing this ends up flattening this line. So I came back and re-ironed this line. And here you really need to be cautious because if you iron this portion down, you're going to see that line here. So here I put a page underneath and just came and re-ironed all of this. Now from here, like I said, need to just let it rest for a day. So I'm just pulling out all of this basting, and then just leaving it exactly like this. I will hang it. It's also why there's no back stitches here, because it just makes it easier to rip it all out, yank it all through. Okay, so here we are. And yeah, I'll just hang it reasonably from the middle, and I'll just hang that overnight so that it can stretch out, and then tomorrow I'll continue. Last thing I should do today is turn this inside out. Now I've just got a new machine, and the um, seam allowance kind of threw me a little bit with this one. So it ended up being too small for me to really open up and iron flat. And there is just no chance I'm redoing this or unpicking. So in this case, I'm going to just have the seam on one edge like that. Maybe I'll put it kind of in the center like that. I'll see how. But you know, ideally, you should really iron that seam open, flip it so this can be nice and flat. I'm just going to iron this up, have it ready for tomorrow, and then tomorrow we'll finish off the tie. And here we are. I just let this hang overnight so that the bias can stretch out a little bit. That is the cardinal rule of any bias cut garment, which you don't really do in tailoring, to be honest. But just so as you know, whenever you cut something on the bias, just let it hang overnight so that the grain can just kind of like fall where gravity wants it to fall. Otherwise, you're going to stitch that whole thing, and after a little bit of wear, you're going to see things kind of like shifting off to the side because like I said, the warp and the weft do not have the same amount of stretch. The warp usually has no stretch, and the weft has a bit of stretch. So when you put it at 45 degrees, it's not, you can say maybe like a true bias, because the two threads are not stretching or relaxing in the same way. So yeah, now I'm just putting this through, just this layer, not going through to the front. I don't really need this many pins, but you know, I'm extra. And from there, I will be stitching it up. And then there's really nothing to it. Just going to start stitching. I leave a little portion here at the front open, really just because I see a lot of very famous expensive ties do that. So I'm going to make that a little bit. In here, you can do some like fun, fabulous, fashionable stitch. I'm not going to, I'm just going to maybe do 2 visible whip stitches like that. And then there's really nothing to it. You're just going to slip stitch all the way. Excuse me. You don't have to have your stitches too small here, but I also don't like them to be too big. It's a bit of a balance. You'll see what works for you. So making sure you catch only the underlayer and the upper layer and not coming through to the front of the tie. Also, you need a little bit of looseness in the stitch, otherwise it ends up kind of gathering the tie a little bit, which is a bit of the challenge of hand stitching is always that balance between too loose and too tight. But yeah, from there, there's really nothing to it. Just going to continue this slip stitch all of the 1.5 meter length of the time. When I get to the small portion at the back, I'll do the same thing. I'll just do a little visible whip stitch there. I'm just going to carry on with that. So that's basically that. Just stitching this all together with a slip stitch. And just when you iron, make sure you don't iron here, because you will instantly see that seam allowance there. So when you iron, make sure very carefully only to iron on the sides. Iron very lightly. Last thing I'm going to do is just put this band on. I've already given it a bit of an iron. And these ends I'm just going to zigzag so that they don't fray so much. And also just stitching this by hand. Just going to position that in the middle. And I'm just going to whip stitch that into place, just top and bottom there.